Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and I have found empires. But on what did we base the genius of our accomplishment? Upon force. Jesus Christ founded his empire on love. And to this day, millions of men will die for him. Fellow Toastmasters, did you ever notice that time gets filled up with things like family, work, hobbies, Toastmasters, and other events? Anybody? Well, I'm like that. Things get filled up for me. And I find that time, except for the fact that it's set amount, is a little bit like space. The space that we have. I don't know if anybody's experienced the same thing as me, but when I left home at 18 to join the military, I carried a little bag of all my earthly possessions. And when I got to boot camp, they gave me what they call a boot locker for my personal possessions. And I filled it up. Later on, I got posted to a ship, and they gave me a little bit bigger locker, this tall, this wide, this deep. I filled it up. Later on, I got a bachelor apartment. I filled it up. I had no room then for my extra car, my antique car, my Harley Davidson, my motorboat, so I had to rent a garage, and I filled it up. Then I got a bigger apartment, filled it up. I got a house, filled it up. Met my wife, had a family, filled up the house and the garage. Had to get a bigger house, filled it up. Eventually bought a farm, got a barn, filled it up. It seems to me that no matter how much space I had, I filled it up. I found it was the same with time. And just by the show of hands here tonight, I realized this doesn't only occur to me. I've got a sister who lives in Newfoundland. And when I had my children, my wife and I had our children when they were young, I thought I was the busiest guy in the world. I had no time. I had a job and a business I was starting, 2 small children, and sometimes a nagging wife, but that's another point. She's not here tonight, fortunately, for that comment, I mean. So I thought that my sister should have lots of time. All she had was her job and her house. She wasn't married, she had no children. She must have lots of time. Turns out every time I talked to her, she told me she had no time. And that's why we didn't talk very often. This was intriguing to me. I got to thinking about what Napoleon said, and I realized that maybe him and I are somewhat similar. Because I realized that all of the things I was doing with my time and my space for the most part, even when I told myself I was doing it for somebody else, I was doing it for me, me, me. And then I realized whose responsibility it was, that I had no time and no space. It was mine, mine, mine. I was always trying to feather my own bed in some way, looking after myself. Even when I was with the kids, sometimes I was thinking about something else. When's the wife getting home so she can take over looking after the kids so I can do my stuff? I realized that maybe the only difference between Napoleon and even Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and the rest of them, and me, was that they were just feathering a larger bed. Of course, they were using a bit more force than I was, but really, maybe the same thing. Jesus, on the other hand, although I don't consider myself to be knowledgeable on Bible stories, or I don't even know if Jesus actually exists for sure. I don't know. To me, it's a story for sure, and maybe there's something to it. But the point being that many people including myself at times, have seen Jesus as an example of somebody who lived for a different reason, called love. And it seems like the difference is that myself and Bonaparte, and Charlemagne and all those, were about me and everybody else, me getting mine. Jesus, on the other hand, he would take the time out to talk to the lepers. What could he gain from the leper? He could gain leprosy. Why would he talk to a tax collector rather? He might just get taxed. But he took the time to talk to them, those lowly people. So I think it's a good example. But mainly what I've learned by trying to have a little bit more love in my life is not for posterity. Jesus didn't do it for posterity, I'm sure, although that was the inevitability. It's that I find that with love, I can come out of my closet of restraints of time and space, and be myself. And as a result, better quality of life. Maybe reading between the lines a little bit here, fellow Toastmasters, but that's what I learned from Napoleon Bonaparte. Who's our... Yes.